In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this adorable melanin themed cake. Hi, it's Karolyn. If you want to learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes, then I would love for you to join me by hitting subscribe and the bell. Real quick, if you just want to skip the intro and get right into the video, there are chapters linked below. So like I said, in this video, I'm showing you how I decorate this melanin themed cake, and I love this theme. This is very unique. This is the first time I've been asked to do something like this, and I'm so excited to make this cake. And just a note, I am starting with my cakes already baked, filled, and iced in buttercream, and I refrigerate all of my cakes so they are solid and I won't mess them up when I work with them. I have videos showing you how I bake, fill, ice, make icing, refrigerate cakes. Everything will be linked in the description below, and also all of the tools that I use will also be linked in the description. And I will also let you know how I came up with this design and how much I charged. So let's get into the video.
All right, as always, I am starting with clean hands whenever I handle my cakes. I got my cake just out of the fridge. The icing is solid. I'm not going to mess this up. I have some piping gel. I'm going to cover this cake in fondant. So I'm wiping the piping gel from the top to the bottom on the sides, dipping the brush in some water to thin it out, and wipe the board so there's no water on the board. Roll out the fondant. I do have a full tutorial showing you how I cover cakes in fondant, and I will link that below. So covering the cake and just pulling out the sides to smooth down the wrinkles, using my fondant smoother to smooth down the sides, and using my little weird pinch technique that is covered in my fondant video. Smoothing the fondant with a piece of fondant and cutting off the excess. Setting that back in the fridge. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom tier, wiping the piping gel on the sides and covering it in fondant. And let's set that back in the fridge. Now I have clean hands, and I just posted a video on how I make this chocolate marshmallow fondant. I will link it below, and I want to make all the shades of brown. So I have this buckeye brown, I have some gold, and I have a little bit of green to cancel the pink hue in the brown. So I just mixed it together, and I added a little bit more coloring to each one to get it to a deeper color. And then to get this dark brown, I added a little black to that chocolate marshmallow fondant. Let me stack this cake. So I do have a full stacking tutorial. I will link it below, but what I do, I measure my straws, and then I cut the straws, put them in the bottom tier, make sure that it's level, get a little buttercream down. My hands are clean when I handle these cakes, and I'm going to stack the next tier on and repeat the process. And again, my stacking tutorial is linked in the description. Now, when I dowel a cake that has fondant on the top tier, I do a little process. I have to remove the piece of fondant and fill the hole and then put the piece of fondant back down. This is all covered in my stacking tutorial. So now I want to roll out the stripes for the middle tier. I like to roll them into a log, flatten it out, get some cornstarch down, and then roll it a little wide before I roll it long, and do that for all 5 of the colors. And I want to measure my cake to make sure that I'm rolling the ribbons out wide enough. I have this ribbon cutter. I will link it below. And I'm doing a little tester here. So I cut a piece, and then I'm saying 5 of them, that'll fit there. It'll go over the top a little bit. That's okay. And I like to cut them out and use my rulers to make sure that they are straight. I'm marking the back of the cake with that little palette knife, and again, get some piping gel, or you can use Crisco or water around the entire side of the cake. I'm starting in the very back where I made that mark, and starting with the darkest color on the bottom, and where it meets in the back, cut it and then press the seam together. And I like to use my palette knife just to make sure that that stripe is even, and then I'm going to put the other stripes on top of it. I do have a tutorial showing you how I put horizontal stripes on cakes, and I will link that below. Now this stripe is going to stick over the top of the cake, and it's okay. Sometimes I prefer that look, and I'm just going for that look here, and I'm just making sure that it is straight and even. And I like to use my fondant smoother just to press it against the cake. Now I have some Crisco, and I'm going to put Crisco on the fondant because I'm putting bottom borders on there, and I did the same thing. I rolled black fondant out, and I just cut it with that ribbon cutter, but a little bit thinner than I cut those other stripes where it meets in the back. Press the seam together and push push it down with my palette knife, do the same thing on the bottom tier. And let's put that back in the fridge. Now I have a piece of non-skid pad underneath my cutting board, a wet paper towel, an X-Acto knife that I can keep wiping on there, and a Dresden tool, and a little bit of water. And all of this fondant has Tylose powder mixed into it. So I'm doing the 16 topper. I measured everything I'm putting on the cake and make sure I printed it out the correct size. I'm going to make striped topper, and I have this little strip cutter, and I'm going to cut little strips out of this fondant. I do have complete tutorials showing you how I make striped numbers and the 16 number toppers, and I will link that in the description in case you want to get a little more detailed tutorial on how to do this. So I'm cutting 2 sets of strips in every single color, so I have plenty of strips. And now I have a thinner piece of white fondant. Make sure the 16 fits on top, and I just want to get the entire piece of fondant wet, not too wet, just make sure you just get a little bit of water on the entire thing. And I'm going to do ombre stripes going the whole way down, so make sure that they are straight, and then make sure the one underneath it is touching the one above it. And I'm just going to do all the stripes, and once I do the dark one, I'm going to start all over again with the light until I cover the entire thing. I'm going to smooth it with a fondant smoother, and now I'm going to put the 16 down. Usually I trace with the Dresden tool. I'm not going to do that. With this technique, with the stripes, I like to use a needle tool. Make sure you put the 16 on there straight. And now I am poking holes around there so I can get like a dotted line to cut it out. Make sure you hold it down with your other hand because sometimes the paper likes to lift as you do this. And this is covered in my tutorial where I show you how to make a striped number. Peel it back. Now I have a dotted line that I can cut out. So I want to cut on the inside of those dots, and I don't want to cut all the way down yet. So right now I'm making a shallow cut, and then make sure you cut the inside pieces out. So if you have like a 6 or an 8, you want to cut those inside pieces out first. Once I do the shallow cut, I put my knife all the way down to the board and then cut it out. And then I like to smooth the centers with a tool, and then I'll cut the rest of the numbers out. It's just easiest to do it this way. And if you see my videos, every time I cut anything out of fondant, I am going to take the time and smooth the cuts. So now I have a thicker piece of black fondant. It does have Tylose powder mixed into it, and I want to get the background, so I'm putting the 16 down. Now look, I'm making sure that the stripes are horizontal, so you have to look. I want to make sure the stripes in the 6 match the stripes in the 1, and then I lift it up and I paint water on the underside, and then I put it back down. This just helps make sure that it stays in the correct position. And now again, I'm just making a shallow cut so I have a line to follow. And then once I have that shallow cut, I will stick my knife all the way down and use that line as a guide to cut it out. This way I'm not going to mess up the fondant. Now this looks horrible, so I like to flip it over, use my tools, use my fingers to smooth out all of those jagged edges. And now I have these bamboo skewers. I'm going to twist it in there. I'm not going to jab it in. Put it right in the middle, and I'm twisting it. I'm screwing it in there. Flip it over. Make sure it's not poking out the back or the front. Flip it over again, right? And I just want to make sure that I can get them up as far as possible. Set that aside. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the name. I have another piece of white fondant, and I'm going to get a little bit of water on there. Now my strips weren't long enough, so I had to do 2 separate strips. So I'm doing 2 different sections, and I will do the same exact thing with the name that I did with the number. So I am poking an outline, peel it back, and then cut all the letters out and smooth your cuts. Make sure you cut the center pieces first. I can't stress that enough. It's so annoying to try to cut center pieces once it's completely cut out of fondant. And now I want to put this on a white background, so I'm getting water on the back of each letter and putting it down on thin white fondant. Again, cut out the center pieces and smooth those first. And then cut an even border the entire way around all of the letters. All right, I wanted to put a white background behind each of the numbers, so I'm carefully using my X-Acto knife to lift the number up so I don't mess it up. And I'm going to start all over. I didn't like it. So sometimes this happens. So the numbers are fine. Now I'm going to put them on a piece of white fondant like I did for the letters. So I just wanted it to match, and then cut an even border around it just like I did before. Smooth my cuts. And then I'm going to put it on a thicker piece of black fondant, cut it out, smooth it. And look, it just looks so much better. Set that aside. And now I'm going to make the lettering for the Melanin Queen. I will link all of the pictures that I use in the description. I'm using my Dresden tool to trace this onto fondant. Make sure you don't press too hard. You just want the lines to transfer. And then again, I'm using my X-Acto knife to cut it out, smooth my cuts. And then I'm going to realign it on top to make sure that the lettering is not distorted and it's in the correct position. Then I have a piece of white fondant. Again, I'm getting water on the back and then placing the letters down, making sure they are in the right spot. And I do have videos on how I make fondant names, and I will link that in the description. And once that is all in the right spot, again, I'm going to cut an even border the entire way around. Your fondant has to have Tylose in it when you do this so it doesn't drag as you cut it. And once that's all done, again, like always, I'm going to use my tools and my fingers to smooth all those jagged edges. And I want this to dry on a cake dummy, the size of the cake that I'm going to be using. Now let's make the profiles. I am not tracing exactly around that head. Do you see how I'm going a little bit into the black? This way I can, you'll see why I do that. But I'm tracing the brown on the dark brown. And again, using my X-Acto knife and cutting it out. It's going to look weird. Just trust the process. And do the same thing for the other one. So I'm going outside of the color when it gets up to the head. Okay, this looks super weird right now, but just trust the process. You see how it fits together? And now I want to do the hair. So I have black fondant rolled out, and with the hair, I'm going to try to trace exactly along all of the lines. When I get around the head, trace the little waves. This is going to make it look more like the picture. And where it meets in the middle, I just want to trace all of the wavy lines. And now I need a flashlight because I couldn't really see these lines. I'm deepening the lines in the center where where it connects, because I'm not going to cut that out. So I wanted to make the lines a little more prominent. And now I'm going to cut around where the faces are and the rest of the hair. So I'm just kind of going back and forth. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now you can see what it looks like. So again, smoothing all of my cuts, and I have a piece of white fondant. Again, I'm getting some water on the back, and then put these three next to each other, and I'm getting a little bit of water behind all of the hair. And now you can see how I'm putting it on top of the fondant. That's why I didn't have to do the brown fondant exactly the way, with all the waves in it, because the hair covers it. So again, I am making the little white border around the entire thing. And then smoothing all the cuts as always. Now let's get this cake out of the refrigerator. I'm going to take a wet paper towel and just wipe the cake board. I'm using a little bit of Crisco, and I want to make this fondant look a little darker and a little shinier. So you can also use a steamer if you have a steamer, but if you don't, you can use a little bit of shortening. So I'm using a paintbrush and just brushing some shortening on there, and then taking a paper towel, a dry paper towel, and just wiping off all of the excess. And just see how it makes the fondant. It deepens the color and just makes it look shinier. Now I have some piping gel, and I'm going to get some on the back and making sure that this is facing front. So I turned it towards me so I could see, but I want to center all of these decorations on here. Now, whenever I do names, I'm getting a little piping gel on the back here. I like to start with the center letter and then go to one side and then go to the other side as I build it out. That way the name is going to be center on the cake, and just use my finger just to make sure everything is in the correct position. Get a little piping gel underneath the very bottom of the number where it's going to touch the cake. And now I want to make the candy. So I have this fondant rolled out a little thick. I'm going to set that aside. Again, all this fondant has Tylose powder mixed into it already. I'm going to make some coffee beans. So roll it into a little ball and then roll it into like an oblong shape, and I'm going to make a ton of these. And then I have this tool, I can link it below. It came in a set, and I'm just going to make the little lines in all of the coffee beans and kind of pinch the ends together a little bit. And now I'm making these little toffee chips. So I'm going to make them look like little chocolate chips, if you will. So get it into a little point and then flatten the bottom. Put it down on the countertop, really try to flatten it out and just make it look like a little chip. Again, roll it into a ball, roll it into a point on one end, and then flatten it with your finger, and then just try to refine the shape. All right, now I'm making the caramel squares. So I roll it into a ball, I squeeze it on one side and then squeeze it into another side, right? So this is not a square yet, the edges are round. So what do? I pinch it. This is such a weird technique. If you have a better way of getting little squares out of fondant, please let me know. In the meantime, this is just going to have to work. So I pinch all of the sides to get a sharper edge on here. And then refine it, put it down on the countertop and smooth it and just make sure it looks like a little caramel square. And pinching the edges as they got a little round. Is that weird? It is a little weird, but that's okay. I have this ribbon cutter. Now, I'm not going to cut all the way down. I'm just using this to make lines. So I'm going to do one line there and then line the disc on that other line that I just made so it's even. Turn it 90 degrees. That was 90 degrees, right? And do the same thing. So I'm making like a little chocolate bar. And then I'm going to use my Dresden tool and just refine the inner lines. If you know me, you know I love me some chocolate. So I'm going to use my pizza cutter and cut it out and then smooth my cuts. Now let's get the cake back out of the refrigerator, and I want to put all this candy on here. So where is it going to look best? I'm just going to put a couple pieces down just to see the placement. Where do I like it? And once I find like what looks good, then I will get a little bit of piping gel underneath and stick it back down on the board. And I like to make it look a little haphazard. That one I want to put in the front. Now I'm going to do the coffee beans on the top. So I'm not lining them up exactly. You know, I'm doing one like sticking up. I'm doing one on its side, you know, just kind of making it look not perfect. Where do I want this chocolate bar? I don't know. I'm going to cut it. That way it fits a little better. So I cut 2 of the squares off. I think I like it there. So let's do that. Let's get a little bit of piping gel on the back and stick that up against the side of the top tier, and then a little bit on that other smaller piece. So I just felt like it looked better like that rather than one big piece. And then I'm going to get all these little chips here, and again trying to make it look a little haphazard, if you will. And I had extra coffee beans, so I'm just sticking them around the top of the cake. Now, I think the hair needs a little bit of texture. So I have some black American Buttercream icing and a paintbrush, and I'm just tapping it on there. And I just feel like it looks a lot better having a little bit of texture on the hair. And there is the cake. How adorable.
So there you go. How amazing is this cake? I just love it so much. This is one of my new favorite ones. So how did I come up with this design? She originally sent me a picture. If I can find it, I'll put it over here. And I felt like it was just, it's a nice cake, but I felt like it was a little plain and I wanted to take it up a notch. So she originally asked for 2 tiers to feed 30 people. And this is one of the examples where I go above and beyond. I decided that it would be best to add another tier. I did that shorter height tier on the bottom and then the other 2 tiers on top. I just felt like I wanted a place to put her name, so I needed another tier and I didn't charge extra for it. This is just what I do sometimes. I feel like it makes it a little easier for me to decorate when I have a little more space. So when I originally, I'll show, don't make fun of my sketches, but I'll put it over here. The original sketch, I thought I would do the ombre stripes on the top and have a little crown and then have the middle and the bottom tiers black and still have the profile on the middle and the name on the bottom. And then I thought I didn't like that. So I decided to do the top and the bottom tier in the black and the middle in the ombre stripes just to break it up a little bit. And when I was asked to do this theme, what I normally do is I go to Google and I Google Melanin clip art or whatever the theme is, and then clip art. And I look at the images and see what images come up, and then I get inspiration from that. So I saw the profiles that came up. I saw like an ombre stripe effect. I saw the Melanin Queen saying. So I sent the customer a bunch of those pictures and asked, like, do you like any of these? And then at the end, I just thought it looked a little plain, so I wanted to add a little something extra. So I texted her mom and said, would it be okay if I added things like caramel, coffee beans, chocolate bars to represent the different shades of skin color? And I just thought it was so cute, and I love the way that it ended up looking on the cake. So this cake is 4-inch, 6-inch, and the bottom tier is a 1-layer 8-inch. I have a video talking about different size cake pans that you can use and do different heights to get different servings from it. This way, the bottom tier is a little shorter. It adds a little visual interest, and you can mess around with different serving sizes. I don't want to confuse you, but I will link that video. Maybe I'll put a card up here, or I'll link it in the description below as well. So this cake feeds around 30 people, and I charged $475, and that was just for 2 tiers. So if I actually thought of this design first before I quoted it, I would probably charge $525 to $550. So I think that's it. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them below. And you can keep in touch on socials and check out my website. It's listed in the description below as well. And if you want to stick around, you can watch these 2 videos next. And hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Please like this video if you liked it. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.